Hello, this is Alessandrina with Dexter and Alessandrina. And today I wanted to guide you through a process of releasing the fear of death. So, if you haven't watched it, you may want to watch it before this video so that you can have some relevant information and get deep into essentially realizing the fear of death in yourself and then processing it out. So there are many ways in which the fear of death manifests. It can manifest through the fear of lack, the fear of certain things or situations, the fear of certain animals, the fear of certain foods, the fear of medication, the fear of vaccines, the fear of so many things that are extrapolations of the fear of death. And until we can become aware that we have fear of death in our system and work with it and clear it, we will live in a limited state of being. It will be difficult for us to go out in the world and make choices that feel open and free and relaxed. Because if we're constantly, subconsciously processing the fear of death, imagining, oh, we're gonna die if I eat this, if I do this, if I take this vaccine, if I, whatever it is that is subconsciously being projected as an extension of the fear of death, if we have these things running in our system, then we are limited. We're going to make choices from those limiting perspectives and beliefs and fears. So if you'll think about some of the things in your life that you're afraid of, and if you'll go through a process of asking if you're afraid of something, and you just simply say, if this happens, then that. And you keep doing that. So, okay, that happens. If I eat this food, then I will not feel good. And then you continue with the process, tracing it to the root. If I don't feel good, then I won't be able to do certain things. Or if I don't feel good, it means something's wrong with my body. Or I'm not healthy. And then we continue through that process of extrapolation, and really what we're doing is we're tracing it back to the root. So it's not really that we're afraid of a certain food or eating a certain food. It's all of the underlying emotions and associations and fears that are tied to eating this food that, again, subconscious, so we're not even necessarily in touch with it or aware of it. So when you actually sit and make a list of your fears, the fears that come up in your life, and then go through this process of tracing each one back to its root. If this, then that. If I do this, then that will happen. And over and over and over again. Until you get to the root. So what? So what if all these things happen? It's only when there's the charge of the fear of death, which can also manifest as pain. Pain can be associated with death. And abandonment can also be associated with death. So it's not until we trace it back to the fear of death that we can then face that fear. We can face the fear that is at the root of all fears, and therefore begin to really substantially release our fears. Because if we work at the root, it's going to really help. If you have no fear of death, it's unlikely you would have any fear of anything. You could simply experience and experiment and learn from experiencing and experimenting. So, what a wonderful opportunity to work on releasing the fear of death. And you can feel when you carry this fear, you can feel the tension in your body, the contraction in your body, the lack of freedom and relaxation in your body. And that's truly a wonderful indication, a sign that the fear of death is active. Even if it's completely subconscious, that your body is tensing around something. And so the subconscious mind is projecting something about the present moment that is not happening and then reacting to that. So there's this wonderful, wonderful process that was developed by John Jones, who's our wonderful spiritual teacher for many, many years. And it's also a derivative of the work of Jiddu Krishnamurti, who was a wonderful spiritual teacher too. And so Krishnamurti has a book, and right now the name is escaping me. I think it's I Am, and I'm not sure which one it is. And he also has a book on the awakening of human intelligence, and that same practice might be described in this book, or at least the core of where the practice originated, how it originated in John Jones. And so that process, it's called the I Am My Fear, or I Am My Belief. It's a process of really becoming aware of how we ourselves are generating the fear or the belief, our own energy. Our own energy is creating it, imagining it, reacting to it over and over and over again. So with the fear of death, if you watched the other video, you would have understood that death doesn't exist. And that can be like an earth-shattering moment for many people, saying, how could you say that death doesn't exist? People die every day. And yes, in some ways, based on what we call death, you could say that they are people who die. And you could also say that actually, if you really realize at the level of the soul what is happening, that no one has ever died. So if no one has ever died, there is no death, then that understanding, that insight, once integrated, can help you face the fear of death. Because if what you fear doesn't exist, then why even focus any energy, any time on it? So of course it's difficult to surrender when we haven't had the experience that death doesn't exist, when we are not enlightened and therefore we don't have access to all our past lives with certainty, not from a sense of ego, from consciousness, having, just like the Buddha in his lifetime where he became enlightened, had the capacity to know all of his lifetimes, to perceive all of them, and therefore how could there be any fear of death? There was complete enlightenment, complete capacity to see what is, to be conscious, to be fully conscious. So I invite you to try this process, to sit with your fear of death so that you can liberate the energy and to say, I am my fear of death. Or I am my fear of dying. And to repeat this. And sometimes people get confused. Well, if I say it, then I reinforce the fear. If you say, I fear death or I fear dying, yes, you do reinforce that energy. You revalidate it. If you say, I am my fear of death or I am my fear of dying, then what you're doing is by doing that in a meditative state, by repeating the statement over and over again. And by the way, we have a meditation for the fear of death following this process on our website. So if you go to our website, you'll be able to use this technique using this guided meditation, and you'll repeat, I am my fear of death, or I am my fear of dying, until as you do that in a meditative state, there is the consciousness that shines the light on that fear, on that limiting belief, and shows that it's not true, that it's not real. And there's the realization, the deep realization that death does not exist, and that your own mind created the fear, that it imagined it, that all the associations it has with fear were believed to be true, and therefore then feared. And so when you shine the light of consciousness onto your own fear, then what happens is that all of the different parts that it's built upon that created this fear, they fall apart one by one. And you can even see their origin. You might, remember someone passing. You might remember reading something, or you might remember even your past life. And so all of these recordings are what is creating your aversion and the negative charge towards death. And so when you face it by saying, I am my fear of death, or I am my fear of dying, and you stay with the energy, and you accept the death of the body, and you also realize that the death of the consciousness, it doesn't exist. You have that realization, not because someone tells you, simply because you experience it, because you experiment with it, you explore it. It might not happen the first time, or the 10th time. It might take more time for you to really get in touch with the energy of the fear of death and to clear it. And it is my experience and my wonderful, wonderful blessing to have received this technique from John Jones and to have applied it in my life for many different fears, including the fear of death, and therefore to experience and explore and experiment with it, and to find peace, to actually find joy and true love for life that cannot exist as deeply when we are fearing death, when we're in fear of death. So I hope this was helpful, and that you tried this practice, and that you gain tremendous benefits from this practice, and also that you observe how your life changes, how you change as a result of facing your fear of death. Sending you much love.